Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a story that's, well, it's haunted U.S. military history for over 7 decades now. It's a story really wrapped in secrecy, deep geopolitical maneuvering, and maybe, just maybe, a hidden war fought at the very bottom of the world.
Yeah.
We are diving into Operation HIGHJUMP, which was officially the largest American naval effort launched outside of World War II.
It's a staggering premise, really. And the scale. That's the immediate red flag for anyone looking into this history, isn't it?
Definitely.
We're talking about Operation HIGHJUMP, or HIGHJUMP, as the Germans might have known it, launched in August 1946.
Right after the war.
Exactly. When you commit this kind of overwhelming force, immediately following the exhaustion of a global conflict,
Yeah.
the stated objective just can't be the real objective. It doesn't track.
Absolutely. And think about the messaging, right? The official story they pushed to the media, to the public, was that this was purely a scientific expedition. You know, geographical surveys, weather studies near the South Pole, benign stuff.
Benign stuff that apparently requires, 13 major warships?
Yeah, 13 warships, an aircraft carrier, submarines.
33 aircraft, thousands of highly trained military personnel.
For a field trip. It's just, what kind of science are you actually doing with that kind of firepower?
Exactly. And the choice of commander, that's where the cover story, for me, completely unravels.
Admiral Richard Byrd.
Admiral Richard Byrd, yeah. For those who maybe don't know his full history, this was arguably the most successful, most respected admiral in American naval history at the time.
A real pioneer.
Pioneer aviator, celebrated explorer, huge public credibility, highly decorated war hero. The list goes on.
So to assign him to lead a simple weather observation trip.
It strains belief. Right to the breaking point. His reputation alone gave this mission a kind of gravitas, suggesting the stakes are planetary, not just academic.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. If the public face was science, what did the secret mission brief actually say? What were those 2 hidden objectives that justified this monumental show of force?
Okay, so according to the source material we have and some leaked intelligence bits over the years, the mission had 2 critical, highly classified goals.
Right.
The first one was geopolitical, strategic. Strengthen American control, establish permanent bases in and around Antarctica, standard post-war scramble for territory, basically.
Makes sense in that context.
But the second objective, this is the real core of this deep dive, isn't it?
Feels like it.
It was to locate and destroy a secret underground Nazi base, known as Base 211.
Base 211.
And perhaps even more incredibly, to capture any associated advanced technology. Specifically, these alleged flying saucers the Nazis were rumored to have been developing.
Wow. Okay, that definitely sets the stage for a conflict, not a cruise. But the most intriguing note, I think, in our sources suggests that HIGHJUMP didn't just discover what the U.S. expected to find.
No.
They suggest the operation encountered something. Well, something much bigger, far more mysterious. Something that, and I quote, terrified the entire military and fundamentally changed the course of events.
High stakes, high level paranoia. Absolutely.
So where did that terror come from? To understand that, you have to go back to the source of the paranoia, the Nazi Antarctic precedent. Why were the Nazis apparently so fixated on this frozen wasteland?
Exactly. And why did the U.S. military take the threat of Base 211 seriously enough to commit 5,000 men and an armada?
This is where it gets really dark, doesn't it? And weirdly interesting. Bridging military history and, well, the occult.
It really does. Let's talk about the Nazi setup. Starting back in 1938, Hitler wasn't just planning a military conquest. He was kind of deeply invested in what he called the search for the ancient powers.
Right. This wasn't just about territory.
No, it's crucial context. Hitler dedicated vast resources, often secretly, to finding mysterious ruins. He believed they held ancient technologies, maybe energies, things that could be harnessed to build the 1,000-year Reich. This wasn't just pseudoscience fringe stuff for them. It was practically doctrine.
And one of these major expeditions involved the crew of the SS Schwabenland, sent to the South Pole, absolute secrecy, 1938. Who was actually on that ship? It wasn't just standard naval guys and scientists, was it?
No, not at all. The personnel included German scientists, engineers, sure, but critically, members of the Thule community.
The Thule community, that's the Nazi occult sect, right? The ones who heavily influenced Hitler's ideology, even the swastika symbol.
That's them. To understand why they were there, you have to grasp the Thule doctrine itself.
Okay, tell us more about that. What exactly did the Thule Society believe about Antarctica?
Well, the Thule Society was closely linked to other groups like the Vril Society and this whole concept of the Hollow Earth.
Right.
They genuinely believed that an advanced civilization, the ancient Aryan race, existed deep inside the Earth, having escaped some ancient catastrophe millennia ago.
Underground cities, basically.
Yeah, they called these hidden realms by names like Agartha and Shambhala, and they considered the South Pole specifically to be the most likely entrance, maybe the only entrance to these subterranean realms.
So for them, the Antarctic mission wasn't just about mapping ice or planting flags.
Not at all. It was a deeply spiritual, almost mythological quest for the origins of their supposed racial superiority tied to this hidden world.
Okay, so armed with this potent mix of occult belief and military ambition, what did the Schwabelin crew actually do down there? What did they achieve?
Well, they did conduct extensive mapping, covered thousands of kilometers of the continent using specialized aircraft launched from the ship.
Okay.
But the significant breakthrough, the one that apparently led directly to the idea of Base 211, happened about 200 kilometers inland.
And what was that?
The aerial teams discovered a massive area spanning roughly 400 square kilometers. They called it the Ice Oasis.
An ice oasis.
Yeah.
400 square kilometers of what exactly?
It was reportedly a geothermal region, constantly warmed by volcanic activity happening deep beneath the ice sheet.
Wow.
The descriptions sound surreal, don't they? A huge area completely free of ice and snow, warm green vegetation, even hot springs mentioned in some accounts.
So imagine flying over just endless blue and white ice for hours.
And then suddenly you encounter this vast, temperate valley. Reports later claimed temperatures around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, hidden behind these massive mountain ranges.
That would be the perfect spot, wouldn't it? Naturally camouflaged, temperature controlled, ideal for a permanent settlement.
And this became the chosen location, according to the story, for the construction of the famous secret Nazi underground base, Base 211.
Base 211. So initially, what was the plan for it?
Initially, as the sources suggest, Base 211 was planned for, extreme future warfare scenarios.
Sure.
A remote base from which they could launch sudden attacks, maybe using advanced technology, against the Americas after they'd conquered Europe. Long-term planning.
But the war didn't go according to plan for them.
No, it turned decisively against the Third Reich. And as that happened, the purpose of Base 211 shifted dramatically.
It changed from a forward operating base to, a bunker? An escape hatch.
Yeah, exactly. The ultimate escape area. The sources detail this massive coordinated exodus in the final years, even months, of the war.
And this wasn't just a few high-ranking guys sneaking out.
No, the claim is this was an industrial-scale operation. Large quantities of crucial equipment, ancient artifacts they'd looted during the war, scientific reports, military tech prototypes. Basically, everything considered vital for the future survival of the Reich was shipped south.
I have to pause here because the logistics of that, it sounds immense. How feasible is that really? In the middle of a collapsing global war, your supply lines are shattered.
Right.
How do you move thousands of people, vast amounts of sophisticated tech, maybe even construction gear, to literally one of the remotest places on Earth?
That's a really critical question, and it's where skepticism is warranted. But, while the public image of Nazi Germany in 1945 is collapse, they were absolutely obsessed with self-preservation, contingency planning.
No.
The sources suggest this effort involved a continuous stream of specially modified long-range U-boats, cargo ships running these secret supply line, maybe between northern ports like Kiel and the South Atlantic.
Possibly using stops in South America.
Potentially, yeah. Using refueling stops in sympathetic ports there. They weren't moving it all at once, obviously, but over many months. Prioritizing the scientific elite, the engineers, and crucially, the leaders of the Thule community, that intellectual or maybe occult capital was considered priceless.
So we're talking about the potential survival of the scientific and occult core of Nazism, going subterranean in Antarctica.
That's the scenario presented.
And of course, we have to mention the ultimate conspiracy theory that just naturally arises from this whole Exodus narrative.
The famous one, Hitler's escape.
Right. Since Hitler's body was never conclusively found, never positively identified, just some fragmentary remains the Soviets claimed, the idea that he too escaped, maybe to Base 211, possibly had facial surgery, then fled to relative safety in Argentina, it's consistently noted as a possible scenario in some circles, something that can't be definitively ruled out.
Possible, yeah. Though highly debated, obviously. But regardless of the truth about Hitler himself, the U.S. Pentagon certainly treated the threat down there as if the entire Nazi military-industrial complex, or at least a dangerous remnant of it, had simply relocated.
Which brings us directly back to Operation HIGHJUMP, the launch. The U.S. motivation wasn't just historical curiosity, was it? It was immediate, palpable fear, fueled by intelligence reports.
Absolutely. Post-war intelligence was apparently buzzing. Intense UFO observation reports, not just over Europe or America, but specifically reports detailing strange military-like mobility coming from southern Argentina, very close to that Antarctic gateway.
So the Pentagon feared the escaped Nazis were already active.
They seriously feared that the escaped Nazis, using Base 2-Eben's isolation, would further develop their advanced weapons systems, the Wunderwaffen, the Wonder Weapons, and launch some kind of preemptive, sophisticated attack on America.
And that level of paranoia, that fear, necessitated the absolute best leadership they could find. We touched on Admiral Byrd, but let's go into a bit more detail about his credentials, because it really does frame how we should view this mission.
It's vital, yeah. You have to appreciate the stature of the man. Byrd wasn't just a celebrated explorer of both poles. He was promoted to Rear Admiral at the youngest age in Navy history.
Youngest ever, wow.
He was a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, and the Airman's Cross, 3 of the highest military decorations possible.
So when the Pentagon picked him,
they were sending an undeniable signal. This was a mission of absolute national security importance, led not by some, fringe fanatic chasing shadows, but by the most decorated, most trusted man in the U.S. Navy.
the numbers just underscore that message, don't they? This mission was deadly serious. Let's detail that military footprint again, the one that made the scientific expedition cover just impossible to sustain credibly.
It's an overwhelming force, really. 13 warships and cargo ships deployed, including the massive aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea.
An Essex-class carrier.
Huge. Then you had 2 submarines, 33 specialized aircraft for reconnaissance, deployment, maybe even attack roles, and approximately 5,000 highly trained personnel.
Compare that to any other post-war exploratory mission.
It's an invasion force, plain and simple. Its budget, its size, its operational capability were immense, far beyond any scientific need.
It's an armada, directed at this largely unexplored, supposedly uninhabited frozen landmass.
Right. The fleet arrived down there in Antarctica on January 15th, 1947, and they quickly established their main military base, which they called Little America, a nod to Byrd's previous expeditions.
Little America's theory, technically.
Right. But almost immediately, the operations timeline just spirals into mystery and suspicion.
Okay, let's get into that. We established this was a monumental undertaking. Meticulously planned, huge budget, intended duration, 8 months.
8 long months.
Yet the sources all confirm Operation HIGHJUMP was suddenly, abruptly canceled after only 40 days.
40 days. Just over a month. The entire Navy fleet was ordered to immediately return home, pack up, and leave.
The cost of just mobilizing that force must have been astronomical. Billions in today's money. What possible sudden, unforeseen event could justify aborting the mission like that? Accepting heavy losses, abandoning this huge strategic commitment after barely 6 weeks.
It's the core question, isn't it? The source material, the rumors, the leaks. They strongly suggest the U.S. Navy ran headlong into an enemy or something they were simply not prepared for, something that stopped them cold.
And Admiral Byrd's immediate reaction when the fleet pulled back to Chile, the first accessible civilian port, that's where the story just exploded into the public domain, at least briefly.
Yeah, Byrd gave interviews to regional newspapers down there, and they were astonishingly frank, incredibly alarming, especially considering his rank and reputation.
What did he say?
He stated, quite unequivocally, that Antarctica posed a devastating threat to America. He warned that the entire continent would be in grave danger if serious defensive action wasn't taken immediately.
That sounds worlds away from reporting bad weather or equipment failure. What specifically did he warn about? What was this new enemy?
He specifically warned, according to these Chilean reports, that the U.S. would be vulnerable to sudden attacks by flying objects from both the North and South Poles.
Flying objects.
From both poles.
From both poles. And he added that this new enemy, because of its advanced flight capabilities, could reach any country in the world within hours. It was a direct public challenge to America's post-war sense of security, implying some unknown, technologically superior adversary living in the polar regions.
The government's response must have been immediate.
Oh, swift and comprehensive, total clampdown.
What happened?
Byrd was immediately ordered back to the Pentagon. hauled in for an intense 2-week-long interrogation process, which, by the way, remains classified to this day.
Still classified. The entire operation, HIGHJUMP, was immediately classified top secret. All 5,000 personnel involved were slapped with strict gag orders, forbidden to speak about mission details under threat of severe imprisonment. The goal was clearly just to erase any public discussion about what actually happened during those 40 days.
And what was the official explanation they offered to the world for the sudden retreat, the casualties they admitted to?
The official Navy line was, well, predictable. Cancellation due to unexpectedly severe weather conditions, just too cold, too stormy.
Blame the weather.
Right. They reported soldier deaths as resulting from industrial accidents, equipment failures, things like that. Aircraft crashes were blamed on simple mishaps, ice breakage on runways, all further operational details. Classified, confidential, airtight cover story designed to just dismiss the mission as a costly but ultimately unsuccessful research trip.
But inside that classified history, or maybe just outside it in the persistent rumors, one event really stands out, doesn't it? It's the core trigger for so many of the conspiracy theories. Admiral Byrd's alleged 3-hour disappearance. Off radar, off radio, in his reconnaissance aircraft.
Yes. An event the Navy publicly dismissed as just a simple technical malfunction, a glitch.
But the story says different.
That 3-hour gap is the key moment, the linchpin for the really wild theories. We know Admiral Byrd was highly disciplined, meticulous. He insisted on rigorous observation, personally recorded everything sound, image during his flights.
Right.
Now, while most of those official records were likely seized and locked away by the Pentagon when he got back, the sensational narrative, the one that fuels the mystery, is that he allegedly kept a secret personal diary.
A hidden diary.
Yeah. Later entrusted to his son. And this diary supposedly detailed those 180 minutes of lost time. What happened when he was off the grid?
Okay, let's follow the diary's narrative then. This anomalous flight, it began with an 8:15 a.m. takeoff, according to the account. And the diary suggests that within just an hour, things started to go radically wrong.
Yeah, the initial reports in this diary are strange, but seem technical at first. Byrd notes immediate, dramatic changes in the color and texture of the snow below him, different from anything he'd seen before.
Okay.
Then, as he flew deeper inland, his sophisticated navigation equipment apparently began to fail, catastrophically. Both his magnetic compass and his gyro compass started rotating wildly, useless.
So he's flying blind, essentially.
Pretty much. And his flight controls became alarmingly less responsive, sort of sluggish. But crucially, he noted in the diary, he detected no icing, no obvious mechanical obstruction to account for these failures.
But he pressed on.
He pressed on, and the diary describes him passing a massive mountain range.
How did he describe it?
Vividly, as a fortress wall, immense, imposing. And once he supposedly cleared this barrier, the narrative shifts from just confusion and technical problems to, well, outright shock. This was the moment of the first major, world-defying discovery claimed in the diary.
What did he supposedly see when he crossed that wall?
Around 10 a.m., according to this account, he reported flying into a region of lush green valleys.
Green valleys in Antarctica.
Green valleys. The temperature, which should have been way below zero, was registering 24 degrees C on his instruments. That's 75 degrees Fahrenheit. A warm, temperate, hidden world.
Okay, that's already reality bending.
And then came the biological sighting. He wrote about seeing huge elephant-like creatures walking on the land below, which he later, in his mind or in the diary, identified as mammoths.
Mammoths. Actual mammoths, extinct for hundreds of thousands of years.
That's the claim in the diary. Mammoths walking around in a 75-degree Antarctic valley. It's a detail that just completely breaks the bounds of all known geography, biology, science, everything.
How? How was that written? Did the diary entry sound like he genuinely believed he was seeing this? Or was it confusion?
The tone, as it's transcribed in the books based on the diary, is one of profound disorientation, disbelief. But the details are recorded meticulously, almost like a log entry, despite the impossibility.
And navigation was still shot.
Completely. Adding to the disarray, despite the air being bright and clear in this hidden valley, he wrote, he couldn't determine the sun's position, just couldn't find it. So he's flying blind in this tropical zone, totally reliant on visual cues and failing controls. He supposedly spent about 30 minutes in this green area before deciding to continue onward.
The descent into the fantastic just keeps going, doesn't it? After flying over what he described as fields and forests, looking like a developed farm, for maybe another hour, he reported seeing something on the horizon, something clearly artificial.
Yes. He spotted, quote, a huge, shining city. radiating light.
A city.
It's a city. As he approached it, he reported completely losing control of his aircraft. The controls went totally dead, useless in his hands, yet the plane didn't crash.
What happened?
Instead, it flew in this smooth, controlled manner, as if being guided externally by some unseen force. And simultaneously, he noted these luminous, sort of cigar-shaped or disc-shaped flying objects appearing near both wings of his plane, pacing him.
And the truly frightening detail, the one that potentially connects back to the original mission objective, the Nazi threat, was the marking on these craft.
Exactly. As these objects approached closely, he reported seeing clear markings etched onto their hulls. Markings he recognized: a Nazi swastika.
A swastika on these advanced flying objects.
Which immediately suggested, at least in his reported perception, that this technology originated either from remnants of the Third Reich hiding there, or perhaps some other entity that was using their symbols for some reason.
But then the alleged conflict or tension ended abruptly with contact. The radio.
Yeah, the radio connection, which had been dead for the entire duration of this supposed disappearance, suddenly crackled back to life. But it wasn't the U.S. base Little America calling him.
Who was?
The communication was established, the diary claims, with an English speaker who had a distinct slight German accent.
A German accent.
And the message was just eerily calm, unsettling. "Welcome to our area, Admiral. We will land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral. You are in safe hands."
Wow, okay. What follows this is really the centerpiece of the entire Hollow Earth Nazi UFO conspiracy, isn't it? This alleged meeting with the master.
It is. According to the diary, his plane landed gracefully, seemingly on its own, onto what he described as a floating platform. This platform then descended, taking him via an elevator deep into a vast underground building complex.
Inside the Earth.
Inside this hidden region. He was led into a chamber and introduced to a figure referred to simply as the Master.
And who did the master claim to be?
The Master supposedly introduced his race as the Ariani, claiming they had observed humanity for a long, long time from their subterranean world, keeping tabs on us surface dwellers.
And why reveal themselves now? What was the reason for this dramatic first contact moment, according to the diary?
The Master claimed they were mainly concerned, but also partly acting in self-defense. Their primary purpose in speaking to Byrd, however, was to deliver a critical, urgent warning.
A warning about what?
They revealed themselves, the Master said, because humanity, which they considered an immature race, had recently achieved the incredibly destructive power of nuclear fission, atomic weapons.
Okay.
They stated that humanity was now in imminent danger of self-destruction, and that they, the Ariani, could not allow this surface conflict to spill over and potentially destroy their hidden civilization too.
Did the master explain the recent attacks on the HIGHJUMP fleet, the reason they were shooting down planes?
Yes. The Master claimed they were operating purely in defense. He stated that every time they attempted to surface, or when they were approached by aggressive surface military forces like HIGHJUMP, they were fiercely attacked, forcing them to defend themselves with overwhelming force.
And why pick Byrd?
Byrd, because of his immense military reputation, his perceived integrity and respect, was chosen as a potential mediator, a critical first contact point. Someone who could hopefully convey this warning back to the military and political leaders of the United States, maybe avert disaster.
And after this meeting?
Following this intense, apparently 3-hour conversation, Byrd was returned to his aircraft, the controls were restored, and he was guided back out of the hidden area for his flight back to the base, Little America.
Okay, now that's the diary account. A single, extremely sensational narrative. But we need to set that aside for a moment and look at the other evidence, right? The actual leaked, conflicting reports of combat. The Antarctic battle that supposedly took place around the same time or shortly after Byrd's flight.
Yes, these other reports, leaked testimonies from servicemen who were there, they lend critical, if horrifying, context to that abrupt cancellation of the mission, regardless of the diary's truth.
What do these combat reports say?
Well, leaked accounts document unusual events starting just 2 days after the main camp, Little America, was established. So well before the 40-day withdrawal mark.
What kind of events?
Soldiers reported seeing powerful lights, moving in precise, tight rows over the open sea, often in unexplored waters where no other nation should have had any ships or aircraft present.
Okay, strange lights. What happened when the U.S. Navy engaged them?
The first reported engagement involved the American warship USS Brownson, a destroyer. It opened fire on these unidentified objects, reportedly without any success.
No effect.
Apparently not. The ship's radar officer reported something extraordinary. The objects suddenly appeared by rapidly exiting the sea, flying up out of the water, and then they disappeared, just as quickly by diving vertically back into the water.
So transmedium capability, air and sea.
Exactly. Something completely baffling to naval technology in 1947.
Did other personnel corroborate this kind of thing?
Yes. There's testimony attributed to a Major John Sayerson, who apparently served on another vessel in the fleet. He reported seeing objects vertically exiting the sea at extremely high speed.
Wow.
Flying maneuverably between the ships, creating intense turbulence, and generating some kind of electromagnetic interference that severely damaged the ship's radar systems, knocked them offline.
And the sources confirmed the Navy suffered actual heavy losses very quickly during this brief period. Can you detail the extent of that damage?
The reports are grim. Shortly after takeoff, an aircraft launched from the carrier, the USS Philippine Sea, or maybe the escort carrier USS Pine Island, reports vary, was reportedly shot down, destroyed in midair by what witnesses described as a powerful beam of light.
A light beam, like a laser.
Or something similar. Simultaneously, or around the same time, the torpedo ship USS Maddox, which was operating about 10 miles offshore, suffered a catastrophic internal explosion, burst into flames, sank very quickly.
So plane shot down, ship sunk.
The leaked account suggests this was just the first wave of several similar devastating attacks. Attacks the U.S. Navy could neither anticipate, defend against, nor effectively retaliate against.
If these accounts are even remotely accurate, it paints a picture of a complete tactical failure. A rout.
Indeed. The conclusion seems to have been drawn very quickly, around February 26th, since the Navy was apparently unable to harm the other side, whoever or whatever that was, and was suffering increasingly heavy, non-combat explainable losses with no way to achieve their mission objectives. The order to withdraw was issued, pack up, go home, effectively ending Operation HIGHJUMP, or Hawksprung as they called it.
Yeah, Major Sayerson, the one who saw the objects coming out of the sea.
Yes. His testimony, reflecting that contemporary paranoia and linking it back to the U.S. pre-mission intelligence about Nazis, reportedly labeled the objects he saw as sophisticated German wonder weapons, the enemy they came looking for, but far more advanced than expected.
Okay, this incredible secret war, lost in just a few weeks. It definitely provides a plausible motive for the intense government secrecy and the immediate withdrawal, doesn't it?
It certainly fits the pattern of events better than bad weather.
But now, we absolutely have to do the essential job of any deep dive, analyzing the sources. We have to separate the historical fact from the fabrication, the myth, the deliberate disinformation, perhaps.
This is where we have to bring the story back down to earth, or maybe out of the hollow earth, as it were.
Right.
Because as compelling, as movie-like as that diary narrative is, when historians and researchers actually scrutinize the purported original documents, the story dramatically fails the test of authenticity.
How so?
The famous books based on Admiral Byrd's supposed secret diary, they were definitively determined to be forgeries, fakes.
Okay, let's explore the origin of that forgery. Because that's key, right? It tells us something about the cultural anxieties, the beliefs floating around at the time.
It does. And what's truly fascinating, almost comical if it wasn't so influential, is the literary theft involved.
Literary theft.
Yeah. The emotional quotes attributed to the Admiral during his flight, the wonder, the fear, and the philosophical pronouncements of the so-called master. The warnings about war, the talk of a hidden paradise.
Where do they come from?
They were lifted almost word for word in many cases from a very specific, very well-known source. The 1937 Frank Capra film, Lost Horizon.
Lost Horizon. Shangri-La. The mystical, peaceful, hidden valley in the Himalayas.
Precisely. The forger intentionally plagiarized the utopian language, the spiritual themes, the anti-war message of Shangri-La, and just transposed them onto an Antarctic setting, swapping monks for Ariani.
Who's the forger? Do we know?
The forgery was apparently perpetrated by a writer using the pseudonym Raymond Burnand. He was a known proponent and author of several books promoting UFO theories and hollow earth beliefs popular in esoteric circles at the time.
So the diary, the absolute centerpiece of the whole high jump mystery, the source of the meeting with the master,
is definitively deemed not a very consistent source by historical fact checkers. That's putting it mildly. It's a proven fabrication.
Okay. That immediately invalidates the whole Master Ariani meeting narrative.
Yeah.
Koof. Gone.
Pretty much.
But let's circle back to the real Nazi motivations, because not everything about the Nazi presence or interest in Antarctica was necessarily mythological or based on occultism.
Correct. While the Thule Society's occult interests were definitely real and influential, the initial practical purpose of those 1938 expeditions, like the Schwabenland trip, wasn't solely mysterious.
Right, you mentioned logistics.
Our sources confirm a very practical, primary military economic goal: stockpiling massive amounts of whale oil.
Whale oil, why?
During the lead up to war and during the war itself, Germany was striving for autarky, internal self-sufficiency. Britain controlled the seas, cutting off imports. Whale oil was absolutely critical for producing fats needed for soap, industrial lubricants, and crucially for margarine to keep the army's food production going when other fat sources were cut off. Antarctica was rich in whales.
So some of the expense and danger of these Antarctic ventures was justified by straightforward wartime logistics, not just hunting for ancient ruins or inner Earth portals.
Exactly. A mundane explanation often gets overlooked in favor of the exotic. However,
There's always a however.
the occult element does remain relevant. The Thule Occult Society was a very real, very influential entity within the Nazi Party. They were instrumental in shaping Nazi philosophy, propaganda, even symbols like the swastika,
Which they stole and twisted.
which they stole from ancient cultures like Buddhism, where it originally meant peace and well-being, yes. And they did draw heavily on myths about hidden underground cities like Agartha and Shambhala.
So the possibility remains.
The possibility remains that the Thule leadership, driven by genuine occult belief, did seek to establish remote bases in hard-to-locate geographical conditions like that potential ice oasis, regardless of whether they actually found the Ariani race or just wanted a safe haven based on their mythology. The motivation for a secret, hard-to-find base was strong, driven by both strategic and ideological reasons.
Okay. And the foundational facts, the American operation, HIGHJUMP itself, remain confirmed.
Right, absolutely. Operation HIGHJUMP, its huge military scale, its timing right after the war, and its clear, documented, hidden objective to neutralize a perceived Nazi threat in Antarctica, those are all confirmed historical facts. The U.S. military was deeply concerned about something down there, Nazi-related or otherwise.
We also need to address a key correction regarding Admiral Byrd's public statements. That alarming interview he gave in Chile, the one that seemed to launch the whole flying saucer narrative connected to HIGHJUMP, it was apparently altered.
Yes, this is a critical nuance that often gets lost. The story goes that Admiral Byrd's actual unedited remark warned that the polar regions would be threatened in the event of future war.
Ah, a subtle difference.
A subtle but crucial difference. He was advocating for strategic defense, for vigilance in the polar regions because they could become theaters of conflict in a future global war, likely with the Soviets. This concern prompted their withdrawal. The geopolitical situation was changing. Maybe the mission wasn't worth the risk in that light.
But how did it get reported?
The phrasing was subtly but significantly changed in public reports, especially as it spread internationally, to suggest an immediate ongoing threat from existing flying objects attacking from the poles. This dramatically changed the public perception from a strategic reassessment, or maybe a classified conventional defeat, to a fantastic defeat by unknown forces.
Interesting how that shift happened.
Yeah.
And finally, let's tackle the major technical flaw. The one that fundamentally undermines the entire 3-hour diary narrative, even if we hadn't already found the literary forgery. We have to talk about fuel.
Yes, the physics problem.
Yeah.
This is often cited as the definitive scientific strike against the diary's specific timeline of events.
Explain that.
Okay, Byrd was flying a twin-engine reconnaissance aircraft, likely a Douglas R-4D Skytrain, the Navy's version of the DC-3, or perhaps a PBY Catalina flying boat, both used on the expedition.
Standard workhorse planes of the era.
Right. These aircraft, operating under extreme Antarctic cold conditions, carrying heavy observation equipment, maybe extra fuel tanks, they had rigid, predetermined flight envelopes, performance limits.
How long could they stay airborne?
A typical long-range reconnaissance flight from Little America might have a planned maximum endurance of, say, 10 to 12 hours total round trip. But that's pushing it, with strictly monitored fuel consumption every step of the way.
And what does the forged diary claim happened during Byrd's flight?
The diary claims this 3-hour disappearance, the lost time, during which the aircraft supposedly traversed a massive mountain range, found the 75-degree oasis, flew over a farm, landed, Byrd met the master underground, took off again, and then returned.
Okay.
To achieve this, the aircraft would need fuel for the initial flight to the point of disappearance, let's say an hour or two,
Yeah.
then fuel for the entire 3 hours of supposed lost time activity, and then enough fuel for the return flight back to Little America, another hour or two at least.
And the problem is,
Given the flight specifications, the known fuel capacity and consumption rates of those specific planes in 1947, a 3-hour detour involving significant maneuvering, landing, and takeoff mid-mission, followed by a successful return to base covering the same distance back. It's mathematically, physically impossible.
they would have run out of fuel.
They almost certainly would have run out of fuel somewhere over the ice, either during the detour or on the way back. They couldn't carry enough fuel for the original mission, plus an extra 3 hours of flight time like that.
So the basic geography and the physics of 1947 aviation technology simply do not support the existence of that 3-hour gap in the middle of a reconnaissance flight that successfully returned to base, as reported.
It creates a massive, unavoidable, practical flaw in the diary story. It strongly suggests the incident as described, the disappearance, the meeting, the return, could not have occurred within the physical parameters of the technology Byrd was actually using.
Which reinforces the conclusion that the dramatic diary events were either completely fabricated from scratch,
Or perhaps the product of a much shorter, maybe genuinely confusing, but unrelated technical failure or weather event that was later massively embellished, maybe by Byrd himself for some reason, or certainly by Burnand, into the sensational Shangri-La narrative we know today.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. We have confirmed U.S. military action on a massive scale. Operation HIGHJUMP. Fact.
Fact?
We have confirmed Nazi interest, both practical, whale oil, and occult, fuel, possible base plans, in Antarctica.
Fact.
Documented. We have confirmed overwhelming fear and suspicion within the Pentagon regarding something Nazi-related down there, justifying the mission. Fact.
That drove HIGHJUMP.
We have reports, albeit leaked and unconfirmed officially, of actual combat and heavy, unexplained U.S. losses leading to a sudden withdrawal. Plausible? Fits the timeline.
Plausible, yes. Consistent with the secrecy and rapid retreat.
But the central narrative, the one everyone remembers, Byrd's diary, the flight into the Hollow Earth, the meeting with the Ariane master, is a documented forgery, borrowing heavily from a Hollywood movie, and fundamentally undermined by basic physics and aviation fuel facts.
Correct. That part seems definitively debunked as literal truth.
So it leaves us with this high degree of certainty that something hostile, maybe technologically advanced, happened during those 40 days, something that shocked the U.S. Navy. But profound uncertainty about who or what that enemy truly was. Was it remnant Nazis with wonder weapons? Was it something else entirely?
And this ambiguity, this tension between the verifiable facts, the huge military operation, the sudden retreat, the secrecy, and the deliberate fantasy woven around it, that's exactly what cemented the enduring legacy of mystery and restrictions surrounding Antarctica.
Let's reflect as we wrap up on Admiral Byrd's final coctic note, reportedly written just 3 months before his death in 1957. Like the end of the long darkness of the polar winter, so too will the light of truth be born very soon.
It's a statement that continues to fuel speculation, doesn't it? What secrets did he take to the grave? Was he hinting at the diary being true in spirit, if not fact? Or was he referring to something else entirely, maybe geopolitical secrets? We just don't know.
Whether he genuinely believed any part of the diary contents, or perhaps if he was subtly trying to push a narrative he was officially forbidden from speaking about openly. The world did respond with significant regulation shortly after these stories gained traction.
Yes. The Antarctic Treaty, a monumental international agreement signed in 1959, notably just about 18 months after the publication of those forged diary books, created a global sensation around these ideas.
And the significance of that treaty really cannot be overstated, can it? The decision severely restricts any country from traveling outside strict, pre-approved boundaries and mission scopes within Antarctica. Military activity is banned. Resource exploitation is banned.
Think about the scale of that restriction. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent. It's larger than Europe, larger than Australia, larger than the contiguous United States combined. And yet this vast landmass remains largely inaccessible to independent civilian exploration or exploitation.
A continent dedicated to peace and science.
Officially, yes. The treaty dictates the area is to be used exclusively for peaceful scientific purposes. But it absolutely begs the question, what are the global powers, the U.S., Russia, UK, China, others collectively trying to keep contained or maybe hidden down there? Regardless of whether the perceived enemy in 47 was Nazi Ariani or something else entirely, there's a fence around it.
What's fascinating here, too, is how the narrative elements, even from the forgeries, seem to echo in modern concerns. Our sources indicate that the descriptions of the UFOs in those leaked high-jump combat reports, the transmedium objects moving rapidly out of and into the sea, high-speed maneuvers,
Yeah.
they correspond almost exactly to the types of phenomena described in recently declassified Pentagon archives detailing unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs.
It's a striking parallel. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, government reports, both historical and recent, confirm that the highest concentration of confirmed UFO and UAP sightings worldwide often occurs near highly sensitive national security sites. Specifically nuclear facilities, nuclear weapons storage sites, and missile bases. We see that historical pattern. The famous Roswell incident in 47, for instance, happened very close to Walker Air Force Base, which was the home of the only atomic bomb wing at the time, and near White Sands, the site of the first atomic bomb test. Area 51 is adjacent to the Nevada test site.
So the master's warning in the fabricated diary that humanity is an immature race, playing with nuclear fire and risking self-destruction, is a powerful fictional myth that strangely points towards a modern observable correlation. UNTs seem intensely interested in our nuclear capabilities.
It certainly raises an important question for all of us looking forward. Given the historical pattern of conflict, the intense military reaction during Operation HIGHJUMP, the shoot-first mentality often seen, and this observed pattern of mysterious craft appearing near our most dangerous technology. Maybe, just maybe, instead of automatically trying to intercept or attack everything we don't understand.
Maybe the world needs to consider that mediative approach that Admiral Byrd was allegedly requested to take in the forged diary. A different way of interacting with the unknown.
It's a profound thought to close on, isn't it? Because regardless of whether you believe any shred of the fantastic diary claims, the documentation of a massive military operation, the reports of advanced, possibly transmedium craft emerging from the polar regions, and the accounts of severe, unexplained military losses suffered by the U.S. Navy in 1947, those remain key, documented components of this very hidden history.
And perhaps the most enduring truth, the one we can be sure of, is simply this. Nearly 80 years later, the world's most powerful nations still collectively treat that massive icy continent as too dangerous, or perhaps too strategically important, to leave open for simple civilian curiosity or exploitation. It remains the ultimate restricted area on Earth.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about as you contemplate the vast, unexplored, and perhaps restricted spaces of our own planet. We'll see you in the next deep dive.